Everyone has their bad habits. For some people, it's smoking or drinking. For others, it might be shoplifting or littering. My bad habit is looking through people's windows. I swear, it's not as creepy as it sounds. I don't walk up and put my face against the glass. I don't spy on people while they're changing. Sometimes, while I'm walking by, I'll just glance inside. Maybe I'll try to figure out what's playing on someone's TV, or I'll admire their holiday decorations. It's harmless, I swear. I never stop walking, and I never approach the house. I think a big part of it comes from living alone in a big city. I moved here from a small town up north, and my family is still back there. I usually only see them around the holidays. I have co-workers that I talk to at work, but beyond that, I don't really have any friends. It can be a lonely life, and seeing other people living their own lives makes me feel connected to the world in a strange way. I know that probably sounds extremely sad, but I never really saw it as a problem. Not until that night. The night I saw something I shouldn't have. The night I saw them. Of all the homes I looked into, my favorite belonged to a sweet old couple. They always seemed happy, always smiling, always full of life. I even caught them dancing one night. I never knew either of my grandparents, so maybe I'm projecting some of those feelings onto them. They seemed genuinely nice, but they did have their own share of oddities. Nothing major, just odd. The first thing I noticed was that they didn't have a dining room table. And whenever I glanced into the kitchen, it was completely bare. I just assumed they ordered takeout and ate in the living room. Speaking of the living room, there was another thing that always struck me as strange. They had the biggest television I had ever seen. And yet, in all the time I'd been walking past their house, I had never once seen it turned on. I figured they probably just kept it for when their grandchildren came over. The third thing was even stranger. I had never seen or heard them talking to each other. You might say they were just a quiet couple, but it was more than that. I remember one night seeing the husband get out of his chair and grab a pair of knitting needles for his wife. She hadn't said a word. He wasn't even looking at her. He simply stood up, walked over, and handed them to her, like he already knew exactly what she wanted. And then there was the final oddity. For me, this one was the biggest. I work different shifts at a 24-hour restaurant, so throughout the month I'm coming home at just about every hour of the day. Morning, afternoon, late at night, sometimes after midnight. And not once, and all the times I'd walked past their house, had I ever seen them asleep. They were always awake, always moving around, always there. Still, I never gave any of these much thought. That was until last week. I was walking past their house at almost 2 in the morning when I noticed something that immediately caught my attention. They were watching TV. I know that sounds like the most mundane thing in the world, but trust me, it wasn't. It wasn't just surprising, it was almost jarring. I'd lived there for over a year, and I had never once seen that television turned on. So I broke my own rule. I stopped walking. The couple weren't sitting in their usual chairs. They were standing. Both of them were facing away from me, staring directly at the screen. They weren't moving, they weren't talking. They were just watching. I stood there for a moment, trying to figure out what could possibly have their attention so completely. Eventually, my curiosity got the better of me. I broke my most sacred rule. I moved closer to the house. Whatever they were watching was extremely dark, and from the sidewalk, I couldn't make out what was happening on the screen. I wondered if it was a horror movie, although they didn't exactly seem like the type. I moved closer, and then closer. until I was almost right up against the glass. That's when I finally saw it. And damn, I mean really saw it. The picture was so crisp that it would have made James Cameron green with envy. On the screen was a creature that looked like it didn't belong in this world. It had an unnaturally elongated head, no nose, no mouth. Its eyes were completely black, but there was a strange purple sheen around them. Its skin was dark, almost gray color. As I stared at it, only one word came into mind: an alien. I was about to step away. I told myself it was exactly what I had thought, just a horror movie. The old couple had finally turned on their ridiculously expensive television and were watching some strange science fiction movie. That was all. At least, that's what I thought. Because then the alien's eyes moved. They shifted directly toward me and began to squint. I froze. There was no way it could actually see me. It was a movie. It was a character on a screen, right? It couldn't possibly know I was standing outside. Then its eyes widened, and it raised one bulbous finger and pointed directly at me. I didn't move. For a second, neither did the couple. Then they both spun around, and even through the glass, I caught a glimpse of their faces. They looked angry, really angry. I didn't wait to find out why. I turned around and ran. I ran for several blocks before my lungs finally forced me to slow down. And even then, I kept moving. My mind was racing. It had to be a coincidence. It was just a scary part of some movie. That's all it was. But if that was the case, why had the couple both turned around and looked directly at me? I decided it was probably best to avoid that block for a while. My heartbeat had just started to settle when I heard something behind me. Heavy footsteps. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing. I kept walking. The footsteps continued. My imagination started getting the better of me, and I felt myself becoming afraid. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Even if the old couple somehow decided to come after me, there was no way two people pushing 80 could have caught up with me. I looked back again, and this time they were there. The old couple were running toward me, and they were coming fast. I took off. I am no track star, but I'm not exactly a couch potato either. I should have been able to leave those old bastards in the dust, but I couldn't. Their footsteps kept getting louder, closer, faster. Every second, I was screwed. Then I saw something up ahead, something that looked like a beacon of hope. The subway station. It was almost 2 in the morning. The last train would be leaving any minute. I ran down the steep stairs, praying I wouldn't trip. I made it inside and practically threw my coins at the ticket booth. I didn't even care whether I had paid too much or too little. I rushed toward the platform. The train wasn't there yet. I stood there, heart pounding, staring back at the staircase. Come on, come on, come on. The train needed to arrive, and quickly. Then I heard it. The rumbling of the train coming through the tunnel. Relief washed over me, but somehow, even over the sound of the approaching train, I heard something else. Heavy footsteps, coming down the stairs. The train began to slow, and through the entrance to the platform, I saw 2 shadows. The doors opened. I ran inside. Thankfully, the final train didn't stop for long. The doors closed almost immediately. I turned toward the window, and they were there, standing on the other side of the glass. Have you ever been truly afraid? I don't mean creeped out. I don't mean startled. I mean real fear. The kind that takes over your entire body. The adrenaline running through your veins. Every sense suddenly heightened. Time itself seeming to slow down. I only saw them for maybe 2 seconds before the train pulled away. But those 2 seconds were enough. I noticed everything. The daisy pattern on the woman's dress, the tear in the man's shirt near his left shoulder. Every detail was burned into my mind. But there was one thing I couldn't stop thinking about. For an elderly couple, they didn't have a single wrinkle. Not because of some incredible skincare routine, because their skin wasn't actually theirs. It was stretched as tightly as it could possibly be, over something underneath. Seeing them up close was completely different. Their bodies were horribly disproportionate. Their arms were far too long. Their legs were short and squat. Their shoulders looked like enormous hams shoved into Ziploc bags. Their faces were stretched tight, with patches where the skin had begun to fray, revealing gray skin underneath. Their hands were even worse. The 3 middle fingers looked like swollen sausages, but the outer 2 were completely limp, empty. And then I saw their eyes, jet black, with that same strange purple sheen, the exact same eyes I'd seen on the creature inside their television. And that's when I understood. They weren't an old couple. They were something else, something from somewhere else. And they had been wearing those bodies like skin suits, far too tight skin suits. They looked at me and smiled, a huge, unnatural smile. And then the train pulled away. Those 2 seconds have been playing over and over in my mind for the last week. I escaped with my life, but I think I left my sanity behind on that subway car. I've kept my curtains closed ever since. I don't want to look outside anymore, because sometimes I still wonder if I'll see them standing there, looking back. I've thought about telling someone, but who would I even tell? The police? The FBI? The men in black? What's the point? I'm sure they've moved out by now. At least, I hope they have. I can't confirm that though. I haven't walked past the Thomas house since that night. I've completely changed my route to work. I've changed my habits. And if you ever see me walking down the street, don't be surprised if I'm looking down at the ground. Because these days, I don't look through windows anymore. And that's the story of the window watcher. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I know it's a little different from the documentaries I normally make on the channel, but honestly, I really wanted to get something out for you guys. I've been pretty quiet lately, and I know I've taken longer than usual between uploads, and I genuinely can't put into words how sorry I am for that. But I promise you, there's a reason. There's something really big being worked on behind the scenes right now, and it could genuinely be the biggest project I've ever attempted, creatively. I can't really say much more about it yet, but I am incredibly excited for you guys to see it. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this little change of pace and you'd like to see more creepypastas like this alongside the documentaries, let me know. Thank you for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next one.
If you all have